Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll go ahead and get us started here. Awesome to see you all here today. Look at that beautiful sunshine. But I hear we're finally getting snow this week. How great is that, huh? Woohoo! Especially if it dumps on the mountain. That's really where I care that it dumps up on the mountain. But it is good for all of our local businesses and everything too. We need to keep them in our thoughts and prayers as well, because that's how this little town survives, right? It is a tourist area, so we need to be looking out for them as well. They are our neighbors down here. And speaking of that, we had a great time on Friday night with the parade. That went pretty well. The hot Dr. Pepper was a hit. I think that's what we gave out the most of, hot Dr. Pepper. Odd, and I did try some. Yeah, it was surprisingly different, but I drink it. You know, it was like all the, 23 different flavors that they say are in there. So it's like you boil off the sugar, and then whatever those ingredients are, you get a taste of that. Not too bad. I don't recommend it every single day, though. Just like I don't recommend soda every day. But at any rate, that went well. We got some good feedback from that, and we met people in the community, and they were excited to hear that we were a church and not just a vacant building or whatever it looks like outside. So that was very encouraging. And keep your ear open for our next community event. We'll be lining things up for that and probably doing the same kind of service work, and possibly putting together our own float to go into a parade. So we'll be looking for a worship band to run on the back of a trailer. I don't know anybody that's like leads worship. I don't know, you know. Next Saturday is a craft day here from 10 to 3. And I need somebody to take the lead on that and be in charge of that, because I will be teaching over in Delcana on Saturday. And if that person is you, come find me after church and we'll go through that whole thing. But you can drop in whenever you would like on Saturday and do some crafting and all that fun stuff. Bring whatever you have, or just come and sit and eat snacks and talk. We like doing that too. Let's see here. Tuesdays, women's Bible studies were in John, but we're going to be moving our time back just a little bit. And now that's on the website and everything. We're starting at 12:15 instead of 12:30. So I just wanted to make sure you know that 12:15 instead of 12:30. And then the first Wednesday in March, March 4th, will be our first midweek service. So we'll be doing a bit of prayer time and a short Bible study. And we'll be starting at 6:30, correct? Okay. And with that, too, we officially claimed our parking spaces out back. And some official signs will be coming in that will be up there. And I will be giving all of our family members here a parking permit that you'll just put on your dash that you get to have. So if you pull into that space, then we know that, yeah, you belong here, you get to have that space. Just so you know, I'm going to set aside 3 additional ones for the people that work next door, the businesses. And it's going to be a first come, first serve basis. But I will let them know that we do have Wednesdays, Sundays, Tuesdays, Saturdays, you know, so it gets a little filled up first. But you'll have those, so you can be looking for that. I think we only have 6 spots down there, correct? Okay. And then, of course, we can park out here. Don't forget, at the end of the bridge, right over here, there's a really great parking lot. Just right here, and it's a quick walk up the street. It's a nice little parking spot there too, and a nice little walk. So with that, I think that's everything. All right, Nick.
So the hot Dr. Pepper was kind of fun. It was definitely a conversation starter. It was. People walking by and you're like, we got hot chocolate and coffee and hot Dr. Pepper. You have what? And that would that would start the conversation, at least where we could have that, that this is a church, which is, it shocks me. It's been here, I think it was Grace for 16 years. So it shocks me that the community as a whole doesn't automatically recognize it. But we also, the other thing is we do have actual signs that are coming that will, that aren't just a little thing. There'll be a sign on the side of the building and a sign at the door. So there'll be some more stuff like that coming. We're going to be in Exodus, Exodus chapter 2. I don't have my mic on again because you guys don't want to hear me clear my throat. So pray that that goes away soon. Because standing still is not my strong point. So trying to stay where the mic picks me up is important. So we're going to start in chapter 2, verse 1. And a man of the house of Levi went and took as a wife a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, dabbed them with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maiden to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." So, Lord, I just lift up today, Lord, that you'd just be here, Lord, that you'd be speaking through me, Lord, that you'd be speaking to me. But, Lord, that you'd truly just give us eyes to see what you're saying here, Lord. And, Lord, that you would just give me the ability to share what you want shared, Lord, and that you would just guide and direct us, Lord, that you'd be with us as we're just here together as a body, spending time. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Exodus 2 is, I guess I got to start with, last week I picked on Israel pretty much the whole time about being a people that, the brothers were not, they didn't understand who God was. And I would say as a conglomerate, as a people, that is true. But in all of those moments in the Bible, there are always faithful people. If you look at Elijah when he was frustrated and saying, "Nobody, I'm the only one, God," and God said, "I got 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee to Baal." There is always a remnant. And Moses' parents would be of that kind. The verse 1 says, "A man of the house of Levi," and his name is Amram. That's Moses' dad, and a daughter of Levi, which is Jochebed, and that's his mom. And Amram's name means exalted people, and Jochebed means Yahweh is glory. So you could say the glory of Yahweh meets the exalted people, right? And Exodus, you get the names in Exodus 20 or 6:20. And it's Amram took for himself Jochebed, his father's sister, as a wife, and she bore him Aaron and Moses. And I love that God doesn't, as he's recording the history, that he never that's going to be hard to talk about, so we're not going to say that, So Amram married his father's sister. So in our world, Amram married his aunt. But in their world, there are multiple wives, and so that doesn't mean that they were that close or that she was any older than, because in Uganda, you have that where there are kids the same age that are, I think there is in Pajuli, JB has an uncle that is 5 or 6 years younger than him, right? Because that's just how that goes when you have multiple wives and that stuff. And that isn't God condoning that, right? That's what was going on, right? And also to remember that this is in 6, it says she bore Aaron and Moses. Well, we know from the rest of Exodus, she also bore a daughter. And it's just to point out that when the Bible, anywhere you read about the children of so-and-so, that doesn't mean that that's all the children they had, right? The Bible gives you everything it gives you is true, but it doesn't mean it gives us all the information of a family tree in this case, right? So according to Jewish history, Moses' parents were leaders and well-respected in their community. There's old books and antiquities or old scrolls that record who they were and what is said about them. But if you look at the impact they had on Israel, I would say the fruit of their lives back up that they were a couple to be respected in the community, right? When you think about what their legacy was, what their children did, and that's Moses was a prophet and a lawgiver. He delivered. He was the deliverer of Israel. But Aaron was the high priest, and Miriam was the prophetess and a worship leader, right? So their faithfulness shaped leaders God would use to rescue his people. And then it says in verse 2, it says, so the woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw he was a beautiful child, she hid him for 3 months. So I imagine there are moms here. Every mother, I believe, who has ever had a child believes that theirs is beautiful, no matter the condition. I mean, my mom thought I was beautiful. And as funny as that may sound, I was born missing a chunk of my face, and my nose was deformed. I had a cleft palate, so I did not look well put together when I was born. My mom's youngest brother, Uncle Bill, he said I looked like he was 17 at the time, and I imagined the 20-year-old my mom and the 17-year-old little brother. And I just imagined this moment in the hospital room when he says, well, he looks like he was in the losing end of the New York gang fight. She probably wasn't as impressed by that statement as I chuckle about it, right? She was, but my mom still claimed she thought I was beautiful, right? So with that, did every mom make an ark for their beautiful baby and put them in the river? Or was there more to this story? And I would say that the word beautiful here in the King James, just as I'm studying it out, is there something about that word? And it is, in the King James, it's goodly. And it's the same word God uses in creation when he says it was good or it was very good. But that being said, the word is used just as many, hundreds of places in the Old Testament to just mean good, right? So there's nothing overly exciting about the word in the Old Testament. It does mean beautiful. It could mean, it's used to say excellent, special, favored, or fit for purpose. And now in Jewish history, back to those old scrolls, it says that Amram had a dream, right? But if you look in the New Testament, there's some more light on it. In Hebrews 11:23, it says, by faith, when he was born, So by faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's commands. And there are two places in the New Testament that word is used, and it's astesos, and that word is used twice in all of the New Testament, and the first time is in Hebrews, and the second time is in Acts 7:20. At this time, Moses was born and was well pleasing to God, and he brought up in his father's house he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. So that word means well-bred, polite, polished, elegant, fair, or beautiful. So it could mean good. It could just mean beautiful. But I would say by faith that his parents did this thing, right? He was well-pleasing to God. What I can tell you is from reading it, there was something about Moses' birth that his parents knew he was special. Somehow, maybe it was a dream, maybe Amram had a dream, or maybe it was just conviction, right? Moses' parents, by faith, hid him. We know God had and last week I talked about Rebekah and Jacob, or maybe it was a week before. We know that before Esau and Jacob were born, that God talked to Rebekah. There's many places in the Old and New Testament that talk about God talking to parents, right? There's Abraham is talked to about Isaac. Rebekah is talked to about Jacob and Esau. Samson's parents are talked to before he was born. John the Baptist's parents are talked to, right? Mary and Joseph are both talked to about Jesus. And all that to be said that kind of like with kids being mentioned in the Bible, just because it doesn't say God talked to them, doesn't mean God didn't talk to them, right? And just like today, God speaks to us, right? There is no difference in this time of God's ability to speak to those that are serving him. Now, if you look at Rebekah, she heard the Lord and she went to work. And last week and the week before I talked about that is just manipulating and lying and pushing God's agenda forward to make it happen. And Jochebed went a different way. She hid him until she could not, and then by faith put him in God's hands, right? Verse 3 says, but when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark, bulrushes for him, dabbed them with asphalt pitch, and put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood afar off to know what would be done with him. So his mother made an ark to put him in the river, and I can only think that ark was really well made, right? Can you imagine putting your 3-month-old baby in an ark, or in a box, sealed up, and then going to put it by the river? And not only her 3-month-old baby, but her thirdborn. And I don't know if you've been around a lot of families with thirdborns, but they're an interesting bunch, right? The parents have a different way of raising their third child, right? The baby of the group. And there's just something different about the parents, and it's not a rudeness thing. I think parents just they wear down, right? We get beat up, but it's kind of fun when you look at Miriam and Abraham and Moses. If you guys ever watch YouTube or Facebook and you see the first, second, and thirdborn, or the firstborn, the middle child, and the baby, and you watch those they fit that stereotype really well. And when you watch Miriam and just her interactions and Aaron's as the secondborn, now Moses has a time of training, and after that he comes back to Egypt, and he's a little more stabilized than a standard firstborn or thirdborn. But Miriam and Aaron, They really fit the first and second born. But we meet Miriam in verse 4 for the first time. And she is at least 4 years old here because she is older than Aaron, who is 3. And it tells us that in Exodus 7:7 that when Moses and Aaron met the Pharaoh for the first time, Moses was 80 and Aaron was 83. Well, we know Miriam wasn't 2 because she has a conversation. So she has to be older, which puts her to at least 4. But then when we get to the conversation, it's probably not a 4-year-old. She had to have intelligence to have the conversation, had to have a thought process. So I'd put her between 6 and 8. Now, it doesn't give us that. That is me kind of trying to put that into where I think she's at. But I would say between 6 and 8 years old, which does fit if she's 6 and Aaron's 3 and Moses is firstborn. That's a fair spread, but she could be 8. Some commentaries think that she might be 12 years old, but Miriam stays to see what would happen. And if you think about this, as the firstborn, and we do this as I've done it with my children over the years, is you forget they're there. Right? You're just having a conversation between you and your wife or between you and your friends or whatever, and your child's there. Well, they're hearing everything you're talking about. They're just there. They're listening. And can you imagine the discussions that Miriam had heard, how to hide him, how to build an ark, where to place the ark? Miriam would have been very interested in what would happen to her baby brother, because this is weird, right? How would God work? Because you know that his parents speculated, because we speculate, right? I talk about my plan. I have all kinds of plans. But then there's what God's plan is. And I will tell you, when I look back at my plans, they look nothing like God's plans, right? I mean, I make them and they prepare me for God's plans, but God has a much different plan than me. I mean, my plan is to be in Uganda, last year, and I told you, and it was lined up. We were doing it. I'm going to be in Uganda 3 to 6 months a year. I'm going to work nuclear power plants, everything. Or I'm going to pastor a church in Sandpoint. This was not on any list of things I was going to do, but I just did the next thing, right? I trusted when I got to this point, it was trust the plan, right? I don't have to understand the plan, but I do have to trust it. And Miriam is that, and I would tell you that Jochebed, she's not there. And there's some trust in that, right? It isn't the mom stayed to see what would happen. It is the daughter stayed to see what would happen. And there is a great contrast between Rebekah and Jochebed. This is still active faith, right? This is not Jochebed, Moses' mom, just lying down and doing nothing. She's following, she has been led to save this child, which, I mean, different times, different, it seemed like, well, obviously she wants to save her child, but this is more serious than, you think about China I think up until 2015, you were allowed to have one child. And so if you had a girl child, they would abort it. But if you didn't have an abortion, there were stories, they'd go out and kill the child, right? I mean, and because it wasn't a boy, and a boy is what they wanted. So this isn't something that is unheard of as far as human nature and protecting their own. I mean, we have the level of abortion that we have in America, right? But this is a conviction in her heart, but she is doing what she needs to do, right? She hid him until she couldn't hide him. And I always think about that, think of COVID, right? You have busybodies. I don't know how bad it was in Idaho, but around the country, there were definitely busybodies that if you were breaking whatever the standard was, somebody was going to turn you in, right? Well, and because maybe they would look good, or whatever that thing is. Well, you had, I'm sure, in Goshen, I'm sure you had those people reporting back to Pharaoh, right? So when he got to the point where he was crying, I would say about 3 months old, where he was crying loud enough that she couldn't hide him anymore, that's the next plan. But this is not her lying. This is not her manipulating, right? This is her, all Hebrews said is by faith, right? They didn't fear Pharaoh's command, but they hid. Hiding isn't fear or even dishonest. Sometimes it's the smart thing, right? I mean, if you look at Acts and you think of Saul right after he gave his life to Jesus, the scales fell off his eyes and he went and contended. He went and shared Jesus and then contended with the Jews. And I would imagine whenever Saul the Pharisee that had been saved contended with the Jews, he was officially the smartest man in the room, right? I mean, he knew his Bible backwards and forwards, or his Torah, and he knew all the places Jesus was. That's what with Paul, I always love the picture of him. He got the key to the whole Old Testament in one download, right? When the scales fell off his eyes, suddenly the whole Old Testament came alive because Jesus is all over it, right? And so he's going in and contending with the Jews. Well, then he finds out that the Jews are seeking to take his life. And so under cover of night, he was lowered over the wall, right? Acts 9:23 says, "Now after many days were passed, the Jews plotted to kill him. But their plot became known to Saul, and they watched the gates day and night to kill him. Then the disciples took him by night and let him down through the wall in a large basket." Now, if we look at the rest of Saul, who becomes Paul, if we look at the rest of his life, he was not fearful. He was not in fear of his life. But the smart thing, he had the conversations, he had said the things he needed to say. Everyone that could be reached had been reached, so he moved on. No reason to stay. So Moses' parents just obeyed, right? They obeyed in faith, and they did the next thing. If you look at Abraham, he's a great picture of trusting the plan, which is all Moses' family does, is just trust the plan. They trust the planner, right? And Abraham, in Genesis 22, verse 1 says, "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham.' And he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'Take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.' So Abraham arose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him." Abraham obeyed. His obedience wasn't in understanding, right? If you look back to Hebrews again, he had faith and he contemplated, right? He contemplated how God would work this out. Hebrews 11:17 says, "By faith, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, 'In Isaac your seed shall be called,' concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in the figurative sense." And that figurative sense just means when God told him to go sacrifice his son, he saw his son as already dead, right? And I mean, he knew what he was taking him up to the mountain to do. And as believers, we don't have to know how or what the whole plan is. Ours is to rely on and trust in the one our faith is in, not in our ability to understand his plan. God will give us the information we need for the moment. And Isaiah 50, this is a verse that I think that we should all memorize and just implant in our like, I don't have to know. I don't have to know the latest conspiracy. I don't have to be on YouTube. I don't have to figure out all the things. I need to listen to him. I need to follow him. And Isaiah 50 verse 10, it says, "Who among you fears the Lord? Who obeys the voice of his servant?" And that who obeys the voice of his servant, and that's Jesus, right? That's a reference to him. "Who walks in darkness and has no light? Let him trust in the name of the Lord and rely upon his God," right? So you don't have to know what's happening. You have to know what the next thing, what he wants you to do, right? We need to be obedient to his calling in our life. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding," is Proverbs 3:5. And sometimes he will give us the big picture. You know, he did that for Joseph. It's Genesis 37. This is Joseph, and it's, "Then he dreamed still another dream and told it to his brothers and said, 'Look, I have dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to me.'" And that is, my mom, my dad, and my 11 brothers are going to bow down to me. Mom, dad, and the 11 brothers were not impressed by his dream. But it absolutely came true. 100%, that's exactly what happens decades later. Now, had any of them known what it was going to take to get there, they'd have messed it up, right? And I guess just so I tie up all the loose ends, if you don't know the end of Abraham's long hike up the mountain, in the verse 12 of Genesis 22, and it says, "And he," the angel of the Lord, said, "Do not lay your hands on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And just know, in that story, at no point was Isaac's life in danger. God knew exactly what the plan was. He was showing Abraham his heart, right? He was showing him that, do you rely on me and my plan? And Abraham, at the end of it, that is what Abraham did, right? He contemplated, but he was obedient. He was doing the next thing. So this is like that. You guys get a funny illustration. It's one that I look back on and I think it helped me so much understand God's this do the next thing. So I was at a youth camp in Oregon. It was called Wild Horse back then. I think it's Washington Family Ranch now, but it is a impressive piece of property. Young Life got it. It used to be a commune. It has an acre building that is enclosed. It's got basketball courts and rock climbing walls and all the things you could possibly have to have fun at a youth camp. But they have rock climbing walls, and they're 2-3 stories tall, and they have hard ones and easy ones. And I at one time thought I could climb rocks, and I wasn't bad at it. And I was with a bunch of high schoolers. I was in my 30s, and we're on a break from, I think we were serving, so we were in the kitchen most of the time. So this was a break with just us, and we were going to have a competition who could climb this one technical section, who could climb it the fastest. And we'd been messing around all day doing things. And at the very top of this wall, there is a really technical spot that you have to do a particular way. And I was helping, as much as I was going to race them, I was also helping them. So I was explaining when they got up there what they wanted, how the best way to maneuver that. And so I am concentrated up there, and I jump on the wall like I'm the last guy to go. Everybody else has made it to the top. I have like 4 or 5 high schoolers that have made it to the top. I get on the wall. I can't get 5 feet off the wall, up the wall. I'm on the wall and I cannot get myself to the next rock, like held in play, like frustrated. Like I got on the wall like 3 times and got off the wall. And then we went and washed dishes, and I'm frustrated because I'm the youth leader that now looks like a complete idiot. And so there was some humbling that needed to be done. And then I go back after on our next break, and I'm still a little, my pride's hurt and all that stuff. And I put the gear on and I climbed up and I hit the bell and it was done. And so what's the point of that? God in no uncertain terms said that I needed to, my problem was I was concentrated on where I was going, not where I was at. And doesn't mean God won't give you where you're going. But he doesn't have to give you the intermediate stuff, right? He gives you the next step. He gives you what is required of you now. Elizabeth Elliot, which you guys get to hear a lot of quotes from her, but when her husband, Jim Elliot, died, she was a missionary in a foreign country with a toddler. And what do? And her quote that you guys, if you read Elizabeth Elliot, I'm sure you've heard it. When you don't know what to do, when life is too heavy, when the path ahead is unclear, simply do the next thing God has put in front of you. And her list of next things are wash the dishes, rock the baby, translate the next verse, cook the next meal, pray the next prayer, take the next step of obedience. And that's what God promises us, right? And that is that understand that we serve a living God that wants to speak to us, right? But it isn't about telling us the end of the story. We know the very end of the story. How we get there is by doing the next thing that he puts in front of us. My job is always to just do the next thing. Going to Uganda over the last 15 years, when I first started going, 2010, I knew we were supposed to go to Africa, so we went. I came back, and then God told me that's where I'm supposed to go to Uganda. And so then I started going to Uganda, and he called me to the Acholi people in Uganda, which is in northern Uganda. And then, about every 6 months we had a mission trip planned. When we first started going, it wasn't us planning it; it was another group. And every time it was this heart-wrenching struggle, because it's money, right? It's heart-wrenching struggle. Am I supposed to go? Lord, am I supposed to go? Lord, am I supposed to go? And 2012, I was at a retreat, and I wish I could find the verse in Job that he used to speak to me. And this was a conviction, and it wasn't an audible voice, but what he told me is, Nick, I told you where I wanted you to go. Nick, I told you who I wanted you to minister to, and you keep asking me when. So the answer was really simple: whenever you can. And that is whenever the opportunity arises. And so from that moment forward, my trips to Uganda were really easy. The answer was yes. And I put deposits down and we did the things. And there were times that the answer was yes because the opportunity was there, but then an outage was scheduled during that time. So the deposit was gone and I didn't go, right? It's the same way that for years I taught Bible studies, and if I go to Uganda, it's going to be the same thing. They all know my answer. If you come up and ask me to teach, my answer is yes, unless I've got something somewhere else that means it has to be a no. But my initial response is going to be yes. That means if you knock at the door, and this has happened, if you knock at the door at 9:30 at night on a Saturday night and say, can you teach in the morning? My answer is yes. Now, that isn't kind of like studying for an exam. If that's going to be your attitude, you had better have, that isn't something you just get to coast through, right? I'm at that point, when my answer is yes all the time, I got studies ready all the time. Now, that one particular study, that was comical because I had like 4 or 5 studies that I'm like, he asked, I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, 4 or 5 studies, almost done. I can just go back through and went through all 4 or 5 studies, and God said, nope, 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 nope. And I'm like, okay, Lord, let's go back through those because these are your choices. These are the ones, right? This is what we're doing. So if you guys can imagine, I lost that conversation. And so I was up till like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that particular place is I have to teach 2 studies. So I had limited sleep. I believe the studies were good, but yeah, I barely remember them. But it's that willingness to do the next thing, right? Do you trust that he is able to speak to you? Do you trust that? Do you trust that he is speaking? Because, I mean, when you think about this, a baby in a box in the river. And the Nile River is not somewhere, because in Uganda they have the Nile River. It's not somewhere I'm putting a baby in the reeds, right? This is not a safe location. So there's faith in that. But back to Miriam, give her some credit because this young girl waited to see. She didn't interfere, right? Until the perfect moment. She didn't panic. She had timing and wisdom that would be beyond her years, I'm sure. It says, starting in verse 5, then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maids to get it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. So the Hebrews, or the princess knew the score, right? Hebrew children were to be thrown in the river by decree of her father. And so this leads us to a whole thing with who she was and how did she have the ability to even have the rest of this conversation. Carl, do you have that slide? So my best guess, and there's lots of commentaries on who Pharaoh was at that time, and this fits the rest of the whole story of what goes on, right? Who Pharaoh was when Moses grows up and everything is she was Hathusheth, the only daughter of Thutmose the first. He did have other children. He had 2 sons by the royal queen, which would have been the first queen, but they died. So this daughter was in a weird spot. So she is the only one of the royal line because she is of her mom, who is the first queen or the royal queen, and her dad, who is the sitting pharaoh. So in the Egyptian court and all that, she would have been almost untouchable. Or she just might have been her dad's favorite. But for whatever reason, she had the ability to do what God needed her to do, whether she knew it or not. She is the perfect person to find and protect his future. Next week, I'll spend more time unpacking that whole slide, but just understand that there's a moment in time that is God has people in place to do what needs to be done. Verse 7 says, his sister Miriam said to the Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, and she may nurse the child for you? And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Now Miriam was in the perfect place. We talked about that. And this is why I say she was between 6 and 8 years old, because there were a lot of ways to approach the princess. Hey, that's my brother. Or, do you want me to go get my mom? But without lying, she just asked, do you want me to get someone to nurse this baby? And what I kind of laugh about is that all the princess says to her is go, which crying babies will do that, right? You got a crying baby, you can get somebody to hush him up. I like that. And then Jochebed came to be the nursemaid, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. So the princess sent her home with her own baby. That just that morning, right? We don't know, this noon, this could be 9 o'clock in the morning. He might have been out there an hour. He might have been out there most of the day. But just that morning, can you imagine the burden and the pain that was in her life and the choices she was making? And now God had brought a miracle, and she would call it nothing less. Because not only was her baby safe, but he was back at home and she was being paid to nurse him. And he was to be with her for many years. It was until he was weaned. And in the Egyptian culture of that time, that was between 3 and 4 years and could last up to 5. And if I am his mother, or if any of us, I believe, would be his parents, I'm sure 5 years old would be the thing, right? As long as we can possibly keep this up. We're not trying to wean him anytime soon. And the cool thing about 5 years old, or between 3 and 5 years old, the core of emotional, relational, and cultural foundations is laid in the first 3 to 5 years. Now, how does God say that? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So God's foundation was set with Moses' biological parents, right? And think of sending your children to public school and the conversations you have with them before they go. Or think of it like this. Think of sending your children to a boarding school. And the only influence you have is what you have taught them before they go. I would bet you would be diligent to teach them as much as you could teach them. Show them as much as you could show them. Give them as much information about who they are and where they come from as you can give them. Teach them about the one true God, about their culture. And I do think there was still contact with his family after, because Aaron and Moses seem to have a relationship deeper than a 5 and an 8-year-old when they meet up in their 80s. But that is a speculative thing. It doesn't say anything about that. And then verse 10, it says, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, because I drew him out of the water. It says, so the funny thing is Pharaoh wanted all boys killed. Last week it was the black hat. He wanted all the boys killed. So Israel would be weak and shrink, right? Enter the white hat, God's plan. And God uses the Pharaoh's decree. Had Pharaoh not had this decree, then Moses wouldn't have lived in the palace, wouldn't have been trained in all writing. And in Acts 2 or 7:21, it says, but when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own. And Moses learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. So he was trained by the black hat to be Israel's champion. Like I said, God's ways are not our ways. God's plans are not my plans. My job is to do the next thing. Now, Moses was trained in all the good and the bad of the Egyptians had to offer. When we go through this section, this is all about God being bigger than us. Do you believe that? His story is from the author's point of view, not the character's point of view. And I've said that many times in my teaching of that we're in God's story. He's not in my story, right? I don't write the book. He writes the book. It's the illustration of that is me telling everybody, hey, come see my movie. And I take you to the movie theater and I buy out a whole movie theater and I invite all my friends and I'm serving popcorn and everybody's coming and the movie starts and the credits roll and the movie's going and it's going and it's going. And then there's this scene and it's an overview of Central Park. And I stand up, there I am. And I'm in the park that you can't really see me because I'm in the park. That's us, guys. That's my importance in God's kingdom. To him, I am the star. You are the star. But in the big history of the world, he's the star. He wrote the book. We're just characters in his plan. And our job is just to trust and obey, right? When you look at just the funny of his name, I guess on the one last exclamation point of God being God in this story is even Moses' name. He was named by the Egyptians. The one who was drawn out was also the one who draws out God's people from slavery, right? God has a story to tell. Will we trust him to tell it, right? Will we trust that when it's dark and I don't know, do we trust that he does know? Guys, as a non-believer growing up with my friends, I had friends that trusted me like this, that I trusted like this. I had friends because I spent time with them that I would trust them, they would trust me to run into the dark and jump off a cliff because there was water at the bottom. I had those kind of friends. And stupid, for sure, but that was because we had relationship. We knew each other. Wasn't because we read books about each other. It was because we knew each other, right? I didn't have friends of friends that would follow me off that cliff. And they would be the ones going, no, what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. Our job is to have that relationship with God, right? Abraham Lincoln, I'm reading a book right now, and this morning specifically, he had a quote in a speech, and it was as he was leaving for the Capitol. And it says, I now leave not knowing when or whether I ever return, with a task before me greater than that which rested upon Washington. Without the assistance of the divine being whoever attended him, I cannot succeed without that assistant. And with that assistance, I cannot fail. Abraham Lincoln is also very famous for saying that his job, he got asked about, how do you know God's on your side? And he said, Madam, I'm not concerned whether or not I am on God's side. I'm concerned, or whether or not God is on my side, I am concerned. I stay awake every night with the burden of whether or not I am on God's side. And that's our job. Our job is to be on his side, following him. So we're going to do communion. Brandon's going to come up, and we had a good song before. Imagine there's a great song now. But it is well with my soul. Do you know the story that goes with that? Is a man who just lost his entire business. And then he lost his children months later in a boating on a ship that sank, and he is on another ship going across, and the captain says, "Hey, we're passing the place where the ship went down and your children died." And he wrote that song there because he knew the God he served. Do you know the God you serve? Spend some time as the guys pass out the elements. Spend some time just hanging out with your Lord. Sing the song. You can take the bread and the cup when you feel led. Brandon's gonna sing. I'm gonna step down, but spend some time with Jesus and just thank him for what he does in your life and that he has a plan. Yeah.